Hi, I'm your host Conor Byrne and welcome to this episode of That's What I Call Marketing, the podcast where you will hear from the leading lights in the marketing world and listen to their unique stories. Today, I chat to Paul Dervan, CMO of the National Lottery and one of Ireland's most highly respected marketers. Paul has spent his career building great brands, working for Ep2, Telefónica in LATAM, Full Tilt and Indeed. In 2020, Paul published his book, Run with Foxes, Making Better Marketing Decisions, which Peter Field called a treasure trove of confessions of an experienced marketer. I've known Paul for nearly 25 years, having met at Paul Newman's Barrettstown camp, and we've remained great friends since. I've also been lucky enough to work with Paul both client and agency side. In today's episode, we cover so much from the power of failure, having likely held views, the flawed nature of briefing, and how a guy in boxer shorts got him interested in advertising. Paul, thanks very much for joining today. And I'd love for anybody listening who doesn't know you and the work you're doing in the National Lottery, just tell us a bit about your path to becoming CMO at the National Lottery.
Hey, Conor. Good to see you again. My path to the lottery. I started the lottery 2 years ago. Prior to that, I'll go backwards.
Yeah.
Prior to that, I like to consider myself unemployed. So that's certainly a strategy to getting a CMO role. I was doing a little bit of consulting and doing a lot of Lego, and I was writing a book. And I'd taken probably a year and a half, and actually had planned probably to take longer off if I could. But I was lured into this lottery role. It was exciting. Pre that, I've had a number of roles, all quite similar in what I was doing, but just different scale. So you and I obviously worked together in Indeed, where we looked after a number of different markets and kind of looked after managing the brand and launching in different places, as well as running a lab for experiments. Pre that, I had done a stint with Telefónica Digital, which was in a number of countries in Latin America, again, launching youth brands, or at least trying to. And then the main stint pre all that was in Ep2, which was then bought by Telefónica in Ireland, where I had numerous roles. I shouldn't even have got the job, but they gave it to me when I was a pup, and ended up being head of brand there, working for some wonderful people like Damien Devaney and Johnny Cowell, where I kind of learned a lot of my marketing stuff. How's that?
Yeah, because it's like, in a way, I'm not saying it was accidental, but that was a great opportunity with Telefónica, or Ep2 as it was at the time, because you'd worked in previously some direct marketing, digital stuff.
Yeah, that was the real break. Like I went in as a planner role. I had worked agency side, but even then, like small digital agencies, not proper brand stuff. And I went in as a planner, a campaign planner, not a proper planner, a campaign planner role. And Ep2 was just at the time, this amazing new brand, and when like people went from having no mobile phone to having mobile phone, and I was exposed to a load of marketing and big brand stuff, and I was in the middle of it all because all briefs came into me, and I really shouldn't have got the job at all, but kindly Paul Farrell gave me the job, probably just because I was so persistent.
Sorry for you.
No, I was very persistent. And I reckon he thought that maybe that I would end up knocking on his door if I did.
Home.
So he's like, "I'll just take the job," So and then I was there for almost 10 years. 8 years there, and then Telefónica after that. Yeah.
What were some of the biggest things you learned in that time? And that's a big question, but there was obviously your career progressed massively.
Well, so
you were head of brand for Ep2.
Yeah. So I tell you, there's some things I learned. But I didn't realize till after it. Ep2 was probably the most consistent brand when it comes to kind of rigor in kind of brand in terms of identity and advertising, and we were obsessive and because you would have done a bit of work with it too. But like we had brand guidelines, and if you put them all together, they'd be touching the roof. Really, there was like we had names of our bubbles, and at the time it was frustrating. But only years later did I really understand that probably was one of the most significant routes to growth compared to our competitors. So that was definitely one, and that stayed with me. I think that the other thing is I got to work for like a couple of wonderful leaders. And so, Damien Giovanni, who everybody knows in Ireland, came in and transformed the marketing team, which wasn't a great team prior to that, to be honest with you. And like we just didn't have the discipline or the knowledge that you get if you come up through an FMCG kind of career. And then Johnny Cowell came, and Johnny, and he was kind of an inspiring leader for everybody. He runs all the marketing for Heineken in the US. And so this combination of rigor and determination and actually belief in brand, and then just a really big account. We're spending 20 million on advertising in Ireland. It's a lot. So
probably also maybe you'd a CEO who believed in marketing and brand.
Yeah, that's true. Like, so, there's always the scraps about, where we should spend our money, where should we cut our money, and, everything like that. But Danuta Gray was a big believer. And she came from an engineering background. She was a big believer in marketing and the brand. And actually she was very helpful to me personally. She was a big advocate for me. And so I think actually, if you don't have the very, very top, if you don't have a CEO who believes in and what brand and marketing can do for an organization, you probably won't have a very enjoyable career in that company. You'd be better off just to move on.
And I think probably maybe if you move to the lottery now where you are, it's probably similar in that sense. Maybe you've got a CEO who believes the role of the brand, and so you've gone into the lottery to, I guess when you started in the lottery, what was your first kind of view and assessment of what was needed?
So, because I'm older now, I'm less likely to just go in thinking I know all the answers and less kind of arrogant about what I can do. What I realized reasonably early is it was a huge brand. Like in terms of metrics, in terms of penetration and frequency, I was like, wow, this is actually one of the biggest brands in the country by a long shot. And that was fascinating and interesting. And I felt that there was a lot of heritage that maybe we were not trading on as well as we could. I thought that so these are the things I thought maybe I could have a look at. What struck me looking in is that we were probably competing with ourselves a little bit. So Lotto was competing with Euro Millions, with scratch cards, and they all kind of looked a little bit different, and they had different taglines, and so I felt, knowing what you and I know about the likes of Ehrenberg Bass and things like that, that there was maybe an opportunity to consolidate that stuff and start driving kind of more distinctive, memorable, consolidated brand. And we did that. So that was kind of the main things looking at it. Like it's an incredible brand. It's been around for 30 years. The other thing, which I guess is not really that related, but there's some wonderful people there, and that struck me as important as in the stage I am in my illustrious career. You kind of want to work with people you like, and if you get those choices there, it's I think it's a good thing. So they were the kind of the main things. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, because but I guess it kind of goes to maybe some of the marketing beliefs that you have. what would some of those core marketing beliefs be?
Yeah, and I guess you know them, but so I should say that I was asked earlier on today by someone else about, well, how difficult was it to get investment for the brand, and I was like, not at all, because that was the job I was asked to do. So again, you had at the very top, which is a belief and an understanding that actually brand is fundamentally important to something like a lottery. I have like a number of beliefs that I've kind of over time found useful, values, behaviors, things like that. So for example, when it comes to marketing, one which I stole from Russell, the creative director in Indeed, when I hired him, which is this idea that you need to be hard on the work but easy on each other, and I really like that. I think it is easy to get into scraps about, like, you're looking at some work, you don't think it's any good, but the truth of the matter is a lot of the stuff is quite difficult. It's really hard to do really good work. And so, we hard on the work is great in the sense that we just can't accept as a group, as a team, stuff that just isn't good enough.
Right.
And so let's not, out of politeness, accept it.
Somebody's worked hard on it.
Yeah. So let's not go, okay, it's good enough, because it could be better, but let's find a way as a team to understand that we're just talking about the work, not about the people who made the work, not about anything else, just that personally don't think the work is good enough. Now, to do that means everybody has to have a decent high benchmark about what good is. And so I do have some strong beliefs around the idea that, like, everybody has to get to a certain knowledge base, and there's certain things. So one of my beliefs that we spoke about when I started there was, you got to study the past. You got to study the past, because in the past we'll see lots of, empirical evidence and all sorts of other things that help us understand what good could be. And also, when I was writing the book, I interviewed Professor Tim Ambler, who's like one of the most famous effectiveness people around, and he wrote Marketing the Bottom Line. And he gave me a great quote, which is, great marketers don't always know what to do, but they know what not to do. And I think it's really good, because you kind of know which mistakes not to stumble over if you spent enough time studying the past. And obviously I've made a lot of those mistakes, but I'm at the stage now where at least I know what those mistakes are. The other one that is probably the most, I had 6 ones that we talk about, but the other one, like, one is share early and often. We can talk about it if you want, but the one that I care most about is this ability to change your mind. So the way we describe it, and like someone's asked me, if there was one thing to take from your book, what would it be? And I was there, if you can learn to enjoy finding out that you were wrong, that is the single most probably useful thing that will help you make better decisions. And so what we try and do on the team is help everybody understand that when the evidence or the facts or anything else suggests that the direction we're going is wrong, or the decision we've made is wrong, not only can you change your mind, you're expected to, and don't feel bad about that. So
how do you get people to that point? Because that is I think we're all trained to be right. Like, even in school, like, kids are taught that, you learn, you get a test, and then you get a mark out of 10, and, the 2 wrong answers is a bad thing. So how do you, with the team, kind of change that mentality?
Yeah, it's true, because I think we are hardwired. We're hardwired to feel bad about making mistakes. And instead of going, oh, that's interesting, we often jump to defend it as a kind of an impulse, even before we figured out why. So we're like, no, you're wrong. And then we come up with reasons why they're wrong. And so it's probably hardwired into our systems to go the opposite direction. I think it has to start from the leadership down. I think people have to understand the benefit of discovering you're wrong. I think I don't think people should feel ashamed when they make a mistake. like there's a thing in marketing is if you haven't made any mistakes in marketing, you haven't made any decisions in marketing, and
made anything.
Yeah. And so I wouldn't feel ashamed about making mistakes. I think it's just part of the process. I think it's a pity if you make a mistake and you don't learn from it. And that's kind of cliche, but it's true. Like if you, there's a great quote, which I stole from my book, which is this idea that your decision making, you shouldn't base whether it was a good decision just on the result. You should base it on the process you went through. And the example that I stole from someone, it's a chapter in my book, which is this idea that wearing a seatbelt is a good decision. Just because you got home, just so you didn't wear one and got home and didn't crash, doesn't mean you made a good decision. You just got lucky. You just got lucky. And so how learning to evaluate the decisions we made and why we made them and how we can do better is kind of part of the process. And some people are better at kind of almost stepping away from it and trying to evaluate the decision without being personally sucked into it. But there's whole reasons why people don't. Like they feel like, oh, hang on, I'm going to look like an idiot, or I might lose my job, or I'm meant to be the expert here and now I'm not. Or so there's a whole range of reasons why we jump to defending our decision as opposed to trying to be curious about how it went wrong. But if you don't do it, I genuinely feel we won't make better decisions.
Yeah, and it reminds me, when we worked together in our early days at Indeed, and we were going to the US for a business review meeting with our marketing leader, the first one, and we were trying to figure out what we would talk about our wins in the period that we started our campaign labs. And we had stuff on a slide and we were like, it's kind of like, no, we're trying to sell this. And then we went with a slide that was empty.
Yeah.
And said we had no wins. And for me, it's like the point you made about the leadership. We had a leader who was like, that's okay. That's okay. And I think that set the tone for us to kind of have permission to not have wins, but have learnings.
Yeah, and there's a couple hundred people in the room or like dialing in and conversion, and
that was terrifying.
And it does lead to kind of a thing that we talk about, which is it's very easy to take a metric and find a positive spin on it, or you can move the goalposts and you can say, well, we've loads of visits or something, you know what I mean? So there's loads of ways to spin a result. And, you can see why you would want to do that, because you don't want to look like an idiot. But at the same time, if you get a reputation for spinning results, then in the long term it kills you. And I think it hurts marketing in the long term anyway, to be honest with you. And so, and actually, if you remember on that occasion, I remember a situation where we did a TV test. 2 different TV ads, 2 different periods of time. It wasn't a perfect test, but it wasn't bad. Like we did get some results back, but we didn't get the cost per acquisition that would make it an acceptable cost per acquisition. And I remember saying, look, we failed in the sense that we were not successful. And actually, Darcy was our CMO, or at the time said he was much more interested in how far off we got. From the number. So he wasn't interested in whether we got it right or wrong. It wasn't like a test in the school. It was like, wow, we're only like a couple of euros off it. Maybe we should go again.
Yeah.
Which was real learning for us,
Yeah. One of the things you talked about was share early and share often. And can you talk about how that works? Because maybe the traditional model is brief an agency, go away for 2 weeks, come back for that moment. But you tend not to work that way.
Oh, I hate it. So, and you can expand that right back into the organization as well. Like, there's good reasons why people don't share, because they're trying to get it right. They want that it's not ready till it's ready. Like, and they don't want to. They know someone who's assessing it might assess the wrong things first. They might go straight to like, oh, tonally it seems odd or something like that. So I fully understand why sharing early is not something people enjoy doing. But the opposite is this, like, it's like any group of people trying to get anything done requires lots of communications and discussions. And I just think it's completely foreign and odd that a creative director might be wondering about something and then spends a week on it or 2 weeks on it with no feedback loop to find out whether they're going the right direction or not. And that's an awful shame. So like we'd say to someone, look, I'll give you a practical example. One of the creative directors we're working at the moment sent me a text on Monday saying, I'm thinking of doing X and Y. And I was like, don't. And I said, so it wasn't whether it's good or bad. I said, just don't go that direction anyway, because I want us to focus on something else.
Right.
And he was like, great. That just saved me like 4 hours of work that would never even be reviewed. And he understands that's a good way to help him, you know. And there are some kind of rules in place. For example, you got to train the team to not be overly critical if someone has spent like hours on something. You have to, sometimes we put a rule in place, which is the client can't kill something. Yeah. Like if you're showing something after 2 days, all we can say is watch out for these flags, and they'll go, look, we got to sort it. We know we're thinking, and go fine. And so the more trust you build, it better. But so it is built heavily on trust. It works extremely well with KV13, the kind of agency you and I know well, who are very versatile, and they'll send you like a bunch of scripts and go, look, here's some scripts that I wrote yesterday. I like the first 2, the rest I think are rubbish, but I just thought I'd give you a look and see what you think. And I'll go, yeah, you're right. Actually, the first 2 are rubbish also, but thanks for them. And in which case he'll tell me where to go, and that's also okay. So I think that level of very close cooperation is the more normal way to do it. But what's happened is, for decades, and maybe not longer, ad agencies have built up walls to stop bad clients from ruining good work. So they put all this work into like presentations and the pitch and the 3 ideas revealed. And they say, let's show the bad idea first and leave the third idea and like, let's bring a bit of drama and show. And it's all so tiring and such a waste of energy. And then the other thing is the other part then is, as a client, how often do I share with my non-marketing colleagues so they also can give feedback? And again, it's dangerous, but we did have a thing, you might remember, where we would ask our team to go and find people who might not even like the concept just to get feedback. And again, that's kind of annoying. But if you know you won't be derailed. Yeah. So if you know that you have decision making authority, if you don't have that, it's gonna not work. But if you do know that you've got decision making authority, then you can share. Like, so I'm the final decision maker on the stuff we do in the lottery. Our CEO isn't. I am. Yeah, and there are times when so that list makes me make my decisions, and then I'll share stuff. And if the CEO doesn't like something, he'll say it, but I'm not changing it. Yeah. And nor am I being asked to change it. You know, and my CEO is so good; he often won't tell me till afterwards
what he thought.
Yeah, because he doesn't want to overly influence it, which is a real mature kind of approach from the CEO. And of course, I proved to be right. So that's important. Yeah. Well, actually, a very important thing is he might go, I don't like this. And I'll say, what matters far more whether you or I like this is what people, and which is why we test it with real people. So, because you and I don't reflect our average customer. Yes. And that's a big mistake you see a lot in companies, which is the CEO or the CMO or someone else thinks, oh, I don't personally like this, or I personally love it. But the question is, what are your punters going to think?
Yeah, you know? Yeah, exactly. That's the kind of I showed it to my partner and they didn't.
Yeah.
It's fine to show it to people, but it's actually knowing what.
Well, yeah, but you need to reflect, like, you need to reflect your target audience. So I'm much more interested to know what my a large group of people who I want to play lottery, what they think about something versus a smaller group of, I saw it in Indeed as well. You'd have someone from a leadership team saying, "Oh, nobody watches TV." I was like, "No, you don't watch TV because you're on an airplane every week, and you're, in the top 1% in salaries of the country or whatever. So your life does not. But like, there are people watching Coronation Street right now."
Yeah,
true.
Maybe that ties into opposing views. I saw something, I think it was earlier this week. Somebody said a great question to ask when you're presenting something is, what is it that you don't like about this, or what is it that really would put you off about doing this thing? How do you go about getting those opposing? Because it is important that you're not surrounded just by a group of people that agree with you.
Yeah. I think part of it is what we talked about earlier on, which is asking people for their open opinions, learning to be open to the fact that you might be wrong, which I think is important, and it's hard, like a lot of the time is you are not your work. So you should be able to put a piece of work on the table and say, I think this is good for the following reasons. What we do, and it's one of our principles or behaviors, is we use evidence. We use evidence in our decision making, and that helps us. So, the last example, like if I showed you, as I often do, like a TV ad, and if you said, "I don't like it," or "I don't think it's good," or "there's a watch out here," in my mind, there's a couple of things. Firstly, here's an advertising specialist, so that's opinion important. But I also know you play the lottery, so that's important.
Yeah.
And then the things to watch out for is you might not be a typical profile of the country, and also, so I go, okay, which of these things is true? Which of these are important? Which of these things might be a bias? Marketers are more biased, than others, because and then so having research, and I do a lot of research, but having research and having evidence to say this seems to be true, but the research or the evidence does not support it. And the more the conversations can move towards, well, what does the research or what does the evidence tell us? You start to, and if you can get people to agree to that front, you start to get people moving away from their own opinion, which is that. And also you can get used to people to saying, people get good at saying, I think X, but I'm very willing to find out I'm wrong.
Yes. Well, I think to me, that is something I think you said it. It's strong views lightly held. So like that openness to thinking, I'm okay to be wrong. And I think that's important. So weakly held views is a great position to take, because it lets people know that you're willing to be, you're open to debate, and like, for example, I've seen agencies who wouldn't pitch types of work to a CMO because they know the CMO said, "I don't like take your classic humor." Yeah.
So the agency knows that the CMO doesn't like humor, therefore nothing comes in that's funny. Right. Now that's an awful miss, because the evidence shows that humor is probably a better bet.
Yeah.
I have a chapter in the book called "Perhaps We Do Buy from Clowns," which is a quote. It's a kind of tongue in cheek on Claude Hopkins from 100 years ago, but where he said people don't buy from clowns. But actually, if you look at all the evidence, humor is a good bet.
Yes.
It might not be right for everybody. It is a good bet. So therefore, because a CMO has said no humor for whatever esoteric reason he or she has, the agency don't pitch it. No one gets involved. No one has those debates, and you may have less effective.
Yeah.
Marketing.
Big growth opportunity, on kind of still on beliefs. Are there any beliefs maybe tied to strongly held or lightly held views? Any beliefs that you would have had maybe earlier in your career that you've kind of gone that, oh my God, that was, why did I believe that so strongly?
Yeah, I was a very strong advocate of direct marketing and direct response advertising, and
Okay.
even had the likes of Drayton Bird train us,
Yeah.
who used to work with David Ogilvy, and I'd gone very deep into that stuff, and therefore I had an acquired a somewhat arrogant view, which is all brand stuff is fluffy and doesn't really drive growth. Direct response advertising and direct marketing is the more practical, grown-up way to do advertising. And they're two extreme views that you see a lot, and neither are true. There's a great quote from, I think it's Mark Twain, which is, "All generalizations are false, including this one." And I think that's fair. I was extremist in my my views on that, and again, if I'd studied the past, I would realize that I was talking rubbish. I did my MBA in 2005, and so I think I came at it. It was a little bit arrogant in the sense that when you do an MBA, you acquire a lot of information very quickly. So So I wasn't arrogant about having an MBA. I was arrogant about this new information that I now knew.
Part of the world.
Yeah, which sometimes I'm accused of doing. And so I do think I probably thought I knew more or better than everybody else, and that would have led me to kind of some views on I can come in and resurrect this brand and things like that as well. But I like, so that's one thing, and I've fixed that a little bit. But the other thing which like I wrote about in the book is if you take an advertising perspective. So I had a view based on a very successful kind of launch of the 48 brand. I had a view that you could probably make advertising and not brand it till the very end, and keep people so engaged that you can allow the branding to happen at the end and be successful. Now, the truth of the matter was, we kind of did that for the 48 launch, but like when I went back and reviewed all that, I realized years later, that we had so much PR happening at a kind of a swell that the TV was just kind of adding. It was just adding context. It didn't have to do all the heavy lifting. But that viewpoint, which a lot of, you see it all the time, a lot of marketers and agencies have, which is, if you overly brand it, or if you brand it early, it's less enjoyable, less effective advertising. And look at these great ads from Nike or anything like that do this, or Guinness. So that was a point of view that I had, and definitely led to a serious kind of mistake in one of the launch campaigns that I did, where it was an engaging, interesting campaign, but poorly branded.
Yeah.
And that was a big lesson, and it was painful. And my advice to people these days is why take that risk? Like stop believing that the only people watching an ad all the way till the very end are the creatives who wrote it, and no one else is. Sorry, that's not true. Obviously, some people will, but like, it's a numbers game, and you want as many people as possible to see. Like, there's a great quote from, I think Jenny Romanek or Byron Sharp, which is basically, you need it's not the ad that people need to remember, it's the brand. And if people don't remember your brand, there is no way it can get into long-term memory. And vast majority of advertising works through long-term memories, with the exception of kind of some Google ads and direct response advertising.
Yeah. I'm sure anyone listening would know or be able to recount an ad where they go, "Oh, that was a great ad," and someone says, "Who was it for?" I don't remember, and that is the failing. When that happens, then you've been sold that this is a piece of art, and I'm not taking away from creativity and the artistry in it, but it's a commercial game as well, right? We're here to sell.
Yeah, like it's, to be honest with you, it is probably the single biggest mistake we see in advertising still, which is, and you can't bolt it on at the end. You got to figure it out at the beginning, and like I've heard all the debates, like it's easy to brand an ad. Like we know we can brand an ad. It's more difficult to do an ad that's well branded, that's interesting, exciting, and memorable. It's easier to do an ad that's interesting, exciting, but maybe forgets the brand, because you can just talk about whatever you like. But we see it so often, and it's based on a fundamental assumption, which is this is so good that we'll keep people till the end. But if you look at Karen Nelson Fields, kind of, she has spans out. You see when people watch even TV ads, they go in and out.
Yeah,
their attention goes up and down. It's not like they're sitting there going, "Wow, that's great." Now there's always going to be this occasional home run.
Yeah,
that is so good that I send it to you and go, "Look at this," and you do, because I've sent it to you, and you go, "Wow, that's amazing." And I know you were talking to John recently on the podcast, and he's made some just outrageously good ads that you would do that. But that's not a strategy. That's like hoping for a home run.
Yeah.
And the way people's attention these days is much better understood. Like, it's just, so my answer always to people is, why take that risk? Like, why would you do that? Like,
and it is worth people reading up on Karen Nelson Fields' work on attention, because it really does hammer it home, really, that people, how people do pay attention and the importance of getting.
And she wrote a book called The Science of Sharing a number of years ago, where she did some empirical studies that actually answer that exact question, which is how often do we watch a video, and does it kill it, and all that kind of stuff as well. But no, it's which is why Jenny Romick's stuff on distinctive assets is so important, because they do the heavy lifting of who is this brand in front of me on TV, and allow you to make it interesting and enjoyable without having to have your logo up on the screen all the way through.
Yeah, definitely ways of doing it. You talked at the start about some of the work with Ep2 and the bubbles, and I do remember them. The bubbles were in the wrong place and they had to come off the last letter. But it is important with kind of the whole like distinctive assets. And as you rightly say, probably at the time we didn't realize that's actually what Ep2 had. They owned blue, right? And I think Johnny Cahill, I remember him saying at a time, like, who thought a telco company could own a color? And they do. Similar, I think Brennan's Bread might own yellow, right? Because, you think of it. But what, even getting into the lottery, what were you looking at in terms of the distinctive assets that they have and should really kind of double down on?
Yeah. Well, so at the time of Ep2, we definitely knew the importance of them. We just didn't have the language. There's a lot more understood about that now. Like I think Jenny Romick with her book, they make an awful lot of sense to me, which is if people aren't paying an awful lot of attention, and most people maybe are light users of a brand, and media is more fragmented, then the goal number one for our team is that people at a glance would at the very, very least recognize who's advertising. It seems like a very low ambition, but if you think about it, like we know from our work and from the research that if you take a 15-second ad on the internet, you've probably got 2 to 3 seconds before active attention falls off a cliff. Like that's not an awful lot of time. And so you have to figure out what's your message, can you get your brand in, and all those other things. If people didn't even notice that ad was for you, it's done nothing for long-term memory. So I'm convinced of that. So knowing that, when I went to the lottery in the beginning, a lot of our brands were competing with each other, so we had a lot of colors going on, which means at a glance you probably wouldn't know it was us. So we're just losing out there a little bit. The online, it was worse in the sense that you know what happens, so you're putting up an ad online, and you're making an ad, and it might not be getting enough ad spend, if any. You don't have great assets, so you're just making your best bet and putting things up, and so over time you see this very fragmented and scattered looking kind of broad view of it. So we did, like, for example, we had red, blue, orange, green, obviously.
Yeah.
Red was a lot of color, and it still is on the app and stuff like that, right? But so we had all these colors, but we tested them, and we asked people, like, which color would you associate with these brands? And the only color that had any like potential was green. So we basically stripped away all the other colors and doubled down on the lottery being a green brand. Right. It doesn't sound like genius work here, but scratch card, and we went to one tagline for all our brand. So it used to be, there was different tagline for EuroMillions, and EuroMillions had this kind of orange kind of feel.
Yeah.
And so we said one tagline, one brand, National Lottery. And actually what we did is we moved the National Lottery. It used to be kind of an endorser brand down in the corner of a screen or in the corner of a poster. And we moved it to the middle. Right. And then it sounds awful dainty stuff. We moved it to the middle, right, of our communications and took stuff away from it. Very much learning from the stuff we'd done in O2 days. Right. And basically our view was our logo should be treated with a level of a high level of, what's the word, in terms of respect, and also that we give it the diligence it needs. We don't cloud it with other stuff, and we give it the prominence it needs to have. In the same way, back in our days in O2, we would have done that too. And basically what we're trying to do is show the confidence of a big brand, which it is. Yeah. And everything else was to play a supporting role to some of those things. So even though we have other colors in our brand, like when you see ads from us, your takeaway is probably going to be it's green. Now, I have introduced a new color recently. I introduced some blue from water and sky and more naturalness, and that's been an active decision, so it doesn't just become very claustrophobic. In the same way, when back in O2 days, we introduced a little bit of yellow in color, and we introduced a bit of green with our rugby sponsorship. Yeah. So, but they're very deliberate decisions. And the other distinctive assets then, we brought back "It Could Be You" as a tagline, which had been gone since 2013. And
phenomenal that it was gone for so long. And I would imagine people thought immediately, if you said "It Could Be You," they would think Lotto.
Well, we tested it. So like 80% of people knew who the brand was, even though it hadn't been used since 2013. So the idea is what evokes the brand. So you just say the line or you show the words, and people take a guess, and like it had been gone since 2013, but actually a lot of news reports and journalists, whenever there's a win, it often comes up as "It Could Be You." So it kind of still had this, it was still hanging around, if anyway. But it wasn't just the right tagline. It was perfect for our strategy, which was all about helping people believe they could win. Yeah. It was in the strategy, and I was like, well, we have a tagline that is an asset. And so again, we're very, very deliberate and consistent and rigorous in our application of that, and we test it and we measure it. So it's actually at 100% now. Okay. So basically everyone in the country who knows those words knows the brand. And then we used our Elvis music, which we just changed, but we had our Elvis music. So even though we consolidated the EuroMillions brand with the Lotto brand, we did it in a way we didn't want to feel like a knee-jerk reaction. So the Ireland TV ad had been hugely successful. Yeah. And we were stopping it. It'd been around for about 4 or 5 years. We were stopping it, but we kept the music from it and brought that into everything. Yeah. And that worked really well. And then this year, we changed the music with the New Village campaign with the ELO Mr. Blue Sky. And that was partly to consolidate this and good causes. And so we're just using one track across everything. And also I was just taking a bet that we could build a new track that felt uplifting and happy and stuff. And I guess time will tell.
Yeah. But and bring the brand, I guess, is again, but the brand you were talking about fresh consistency as well. Like,
yeah. Which is a line from from John and Dave Turner, which is, so the last asset, which was an important one, is we didn't have a visual asset that we could use quickly. We had a music one, we had a logo, we had a color, but color is very hard to own. Like, there's lots of brands that are green, so you can just do your best, but you will never own a color, really. And like, even red, you've got like Vodafone, Virgin, Coke, Santander, like, it's, depending on context. And so we actively created the water slides, which, obviously very well, but we did that as a way to, there's a big idea behind this, which is the, you have your own small role in that, but the idea of a lotto winner doing something for their community. And that's in a very theoretical idea. But we made it a very practical, fun, enjoyable way through the water slides. But part of that was to build something that we can use. So that water slide asset has now got like 90% recognition. When you just show water slides, people know who the brand is, which means that when we put them into tiny 6-second ads or 10-second ads, people are going to know it's us. So we're not going to have misattribution. We're not, all those 2 seconds attention we talked about earlier on, we get immediately. And actually what we've done in our most recent campaign, we're starting to test, is not just the new music, but we're actually testing the yellow ring without the slides.
Yeah, because I spotted that in the new ad, where the 6-second ad where the trucks with the rings are going across the screen. Then in the new ad, I see the trucks with the same truck. I may not be, but it looks exactly the same truck
with the rings.
Background, with the rings, and I'm like, that's great, tying it all together.
Yeah. But even like in some of our short ads and even our posters, there's no water slide. It's just water and a ring. And actually, we're taking some bets here because a lot of it isn't as green as you'd like it to be. So that's why we're just doing the blue stuff. But the yellow ring, hopefully, and we're testing that, so we'll know in a month's time whether the yellow ring on its own in water, we've done enough to make that connection. And if that's the case, then you can have a yellow ring rolling across like a banner ad. You know what I mean? Like, you can move away to a lot of stuff, or you can have, there's lots of, basically we're building a toolkit of assets that you don't have to use, but you can use. And we didn't have that visual connector because media is so much more fragmented. The one thing that we don't have, which I'd like, and I tried, but I ran into some challenges, is maybe a character, as an asset. And we may get there. And
the good thing about the yellow rings is when people are on their holidays in Spain or Portugal and they're at a water park, they'll think about the lottery.
Except they can't play.
They can't play.
No, you have to be here to play. But that's it. Yeah, that's about it. So the asset's been a really important part. And actually, I think, go back to one of your earlier questions, I don't think I understood this, let's just call it the strategic importance of assets. Like, when I was a younger, inexperienced, much more handsome marketer, I thought about the bubbles and identity as, look, it's good for consistency.
Yeah.
I didn't realize how important, because I didn't understand memory structures, attention. I didn't understand these things. And so when we do our stuff, we explain to our team, and we have a training for all employees, not just for our team, but we explain not just what our assets are, why they're so important, how it works in terms of memory structures, and how all these build the ability for our brand to get noticed, which gets into long-term memory, which is kind of, and then leads back in things like category entry points. So I didn't realize that, and so we were just doing it, and in fairness, the research probably wasn't available back then anyway.
Probably not, but it is interesting again though too. It was happening, but it was, people weren't able to.
They knew what they were doing. So Charles Valance from VCP and a guy called Gary, who from Lambie, and like, it was amazing. It was amazing, and probably didn't get the credit. It was just seen as kind of brand police and
completely.
And actually, when you're in it, it's quite difficult because you're like, how do you make how do you make the ad cut through?
Yeah.
How do you now cut through the individual execution cut through while staying consistent? And I think that's kind of the fresh consistency we spoke about. So if you take the Village ad at the moment, it's a very different ad to the Gotta Share the Love, which was the guy in the apartment. Like it's a different ad. One is this guy, and it's a kind of a documentary style.
Yeah.
And it's a rug pull ad, you know. While the Village is Truman Show stuff, you know what I mean? Like it's a woman who wins and hides and shares with her friends. So they're very different ads. And if you didn't have the music on, that's changed anyway. But if you wouldn't know the same ads. But the consistency is the water slide throughout that. Now, whether we can continue to do fresh stories using the assets like the water slides is yet to be seen. Like there may be a stage where you find you know where else to go on that, but you can use them for jackpot ads forever. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I guess we've talked a bit about some of the work that you've done, but I'd love to know, you know, when you think about some of the ads you made, what are the ones that kind of stand out to you as, you know, just ones that you loved, either making
that I made,
either making or just, you know, you look back and go, I just love still looking at that ad for whatever reason. Yeah,
I should say that, you know, anything that's been really good has probably had the likes of Eamon McCarthy in the middle of it, in case she watches this. I tell you, I like all forms of communication. Like I like emails, like I like everything, you know, but I like if you go to kind of your film or TV, I think we made some really good ads in O2. One of my favorites is the one where we had Brian O'Driscoll and Paul O'Connell and Johnny Sexton, and we kind of dropped them in a park in the Upper End, Rathgar. Yeah. And they're just basically playing, like, you know, jumpers down, goalpost stuff, and they're just playing. They're playing with the community, and that was a wonderful ad to make, and it just worked out really well. The weather was great, and we had some music from Badly Drawn Boy, which was the track. And funny enough, we had no idea what the message was. This is terrible to be telling, honestly, but we had no idea what the message was. And Paul Pelby talks about this all the time. We knew the associations we wanted a bit. Like at the time, this was for the Rugby World Cup. And rugby at the time were all big, masculine kind of, you know, if you think of, you know, not dark, but like it was very masculine kind of war kind of metaphors. And then we had this lovely kind of just play around the park with some kids and people laughing, like Paul O'Connell and Brian laughing out loud. And it was just, we wanted to appeal to households and families, not just your lager drinking rugby players and things like that as well. So we knew what we wanted to do. We had no idea what the message was going to be till about like 3 weeks after we made the ad. And I remember I was on a different shoot.
We fixed it in the edit.
I was myself and Emer sitting down waiting for setups in a different shoot in London, trying to figure what might the message be, which is not the most unusual thing. So that was a wonderful ad. I have to say the launch of the O2 venue with the Florence Machine track, Cosmic Love, which Emer will take full credit for, and probably rightly so. And again, that's a really interesting ad because we struggled for 6 months to figure out what the campaign would look like, and we eventually bought an execution, not an idea. And there was a great Schweppes reference point that we went for, as well as the director done a wonderful ad for Adidas, and so we bought an execution, but it's funny because that actually is just like the most wonderful piece of advertising.
It's a beautiful ad.
Yeah, it is a beautiful ad, and like it's now probably it created all these things later on in the industry where slow-mo became a thing, where you had these people dancing slowly in festivals and stuff like that. But so we're responsible for that terrible stuff. But we got very, very lucky with the music, because that track, because at the time Florence Machine wasn't known in Ireland, but she was just weeks away from becoming known.
Right.
And so we got very lucky with that. I have to say, that one of my favorite ads we made was the launch of the 48 campaign. Actually, two or three of them. The one was the girl, which was just wonderful, with that Bren wrote with Tom Jackson. With Tom Jackson, actually, he was just like a young fella, and that was I loved everything about that ad because it was just so different to everything out there. We knew the other brands couldn't go there.
Yeah.
And it was, as you know, it was a coming of age story, which I'm always a sucker for. And but there's some wonderful stuff, because if you look at the beginning of the ad, you see this very innocent girl wearing all white. And then when you go to the very end ad, which is meant to have been like 48 months later, she's like full of kind of confidence and kind of, and it's some really good stuff going on in that. And we did that very cheaply, but it's got a, we used references from some jeans and stuff like that. Like it was a very engaging, like people were just like, what is this? You know?
Yeah.
And the follow-up ad we did, which also we made some mistakes, but it was very, very good, was the Japanese one, where we decided to just make an ad in Japanese for Ireland. And it was, the J-pop stuff.
It was brilliant. I love that.
Yeah, that was just. I remember at one stage having a discussion about whether we'd have subtitles. We're like, it makes no sense anyway. Why bother?
Well, and we've obviously for Indeed we've our ad in Japan, and I was like, what? Like let's do what 48 did and just use that ad in Spain and just see what. Well,
happens. Actually, it wasn't a million miles away, I guess. Yeah. So I do think those good. I really enjoyed the first. Like I really enjoyed the two water slide ads that we've made this one. Like I really love the rug pull on the first one, because that came from a joke originally, working with Owen, where and so that was particularly good and very well executed. I did like some of the ones we did in Indeed. We never really pulled them off as well as we'd like to. So I guess it was frustrating in many ways.
How about the work of others? Like what work maybe that you're seeing at the minute that you're enjoying or liking, or think people are doing well?
I'm trying to think of stuff that I like at the moment. I was saying to Shane earlier on, I think Super Value stuff's pretty good, and in terms of the Christmas work and things like that. Yeah. I don't know. I think I would say that advertising is not as good. Like there was a golden period in the 80s and the 90s, mostly from the UK, where I don't know if you've read Orlando's most recent book, but there's a lot to suggest that advertising is not as enjoyable as it used to be, and there's some strong correlation between enjoyable work and effective work. And so I think that we're not seeing great work. I have to say, I love the stuff that RTE did for their drama. Did you see that stuff?
No.
So, see, this is the problem with fragmentation. But RTE came out with some ads for their new drama series. Some really engaging. It reminded me a little bit of like it was like straight to camera, kind of pulling you in. It's really good. It was really good stuff. And that was the most interesting TV ads I saw in Ireland in the last while. But I just don't think it's as good as it used to be.
Yeah, because and you're right, fragmentation, but also I think maybe challenges people have to demonstrate, in such short periods of time, things are working. We know that building a brand takes time. Things like fame work better. Also, I think people think, they talk about fame and then they tie emotion to it, and everyone thinks then emotion has to be like the piano-led thing. And then you end up with kind of that work can be quite vanilla then as well. And it's not adding anything to kind of the long-term.
Yeah, people do confuse emotion with the tender kind of warm kind of like heartfelt. Yeah, it's the word. But of course that's quite hard to do, and And you kind of build that stuff. You know what I mean? Like you need longer formats, and it's hard to do well. And you need performance, and you need and also what you and I might think is heartfelt, others might just think it's boring.
Yeah.
You know, so like that's why humor is a better bet.
Yeah.
All the time, to be honest with you.
It's funny. I think we've come out obviously the last year where I think people the last 2 years people felt they couldn't do humor, and I was just watching this podcast, but some of the previews for Super Bowl ads. Humor seems like it's going to be big, I think so I think we're hopefully maybe coming back to that people feel, well, look, we're maybe getting back to a better world where we don't have to be so careful and heartfelt.
Yeah, because it used to be the Super Bowl used to be mostly funny stuff.
Yeah.
And humor, like you can get it wrong too, as in what you might find funny, I don't, or likewise. But like we talk about our work as being light entertainment, and it is interesting. I remember a couple of years ago, when I was doing a bit of research for the book, the most watched TV show on Netflix in the UK in 2018 and 2018 was Friends. And you're like, hang on, there's all this kind of award-winning movies and TV series and documentaries. Yeah. And then people are watching something that they know really well, that they've seen 100 times. What's that about? And, part of it is you come home, you're tired, you don't really want to think, right?
Yeah.
You don't there's times when you want to watch like 12 Years a Slave, but you're like, other times you go, I'll have to just, I just want a bit of kind of easy, kind of go over my head type stuff. And in that context, why do we think people are going to engage and listen to ads? Paul Feldwick talks about, I can't remember who he's quoting, but he talks about the idea that if you're going to come into someone's living room uninvited, you better be charming. And so,
and that came from the advent of TV advertising, where it was the first time people were putting ads on TV. It was like, if you were invited into someone's living room, you need to be a good guest, at least be entertaining. I remember reading that in his book.
Yeah, like there was a time in somewhere again around the 90s where they asked this question on a regular basis, which is the advertising more enjoyable than the programming, the content? And it was until about the 90s, and then started going. So either the content got much better, TV programming, or the ads got a lot worse. Or maybe one argument is there's a lot more ads, therefore if you go on, it's like part of it comes down to, and I think it's a fascinating thing, which is how do you think advertising actually works? Like it's a question that doesn't get asked an awful lot. And Stephen King, the planner who kind of invented the word account planning, he said it's not as much about what advertising does to people as to what people do with advertising. And so if you think that advertising is about, do you remember the training we got with Paul Feldwick, where he showed like the Thelma Noodles case study?
Yes.
Which is just this bizarre kind of ad, and then asked everyone in the room, do you think it worked?
That's right.
And really what you got was a whole range of opinions, but their opinions were based on how they think advertising does work. So they're like, well, there's no unique proposition in there, or it's not differentiated. Yeah. It's not telling us why these noodles are better than any other noodles. And then other people are like, well, I love the music, and the ad was well branded, and it was a very, very successful campaign. I have a conversation a lot. I was talking to Owen about this today, but in K13, but so how do we think our advertising is actually working?
Yeah.
What goes on in all those steps between them seeing an ad or hearing one and deciding to buy?
do something. Yeah.
And people have a whole range of theories on that. Advertising theories, there's persuasion theory, there's the hierarchy effects theories. All these are theories about how the advertising works. But your theory on how advertising works will absolutely influence the brief, how you critique the brief. If you think it's salience, then you would push for famous salience work. If you think it's persuasion, you'll end up making work that you think is trying to persuade someone from X to Y.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was a wonderful session, Paul Felder. It was like this history of advertising and watching ads. Like anyone in marketing who is a team and is involved in advertising should definitely get Paul Felder over to do this.
You should track him down for one of these. His most recent book, Fedler, is again, Wild's Fedler's thing is an amazing, very factual, but story led understanding that basically takes a stab at all the assumptions that we have.
Yeah.
Going into the market, which was, how do we have to say X in an ad because that's the important part. Do you remember we did a campaign in Indeed where we launched, it was the resume campaign, but we launched a campaign, but in studio doing the London version, Owen, the copywriter, rang and said, listen, the guy who's doing the voiceover, he's half English. He basically was able to go into his national tongue language accent, and we tested a typical English accent that you might hear in all ads, and then we tested him to his normal accent. So I can't remember which country he is. I think he's basically had one parent from one country, and therefore he had the ability to switch between the things.
Yeah.
And he did it in his own kind of native accent. And we tested both ads, and the scores were so much higher.
Yeah.
And what I thought was interesting in reflection on that was that wasn't a strategic decision. That was a tactical decision made by a copywriter who had a good sense of things.
Yeah.
Yet we'd spent like weeks and months in meetings discussing every other aspect.
I know.
Yeah, you know what I mean? So the things that we think are important are often not important, and the things that we think are not important often are. Like I do believe strongly that performance is really important in advertising now. So in the lottery ad last year, when your man comes down the slide and he pulls out his speedos, we all know that's a really important moment in the ad, and it's not. We don't leave that to. We as much as possible leave that not to look. You know, or even like in the new ad, there's like the woman's like, "Oh, Barry," a couple of times, and we'd load of discussions, debates about how important that might be in terms of people remembering it versus what's said at the very end. Yeah,
even her face when she's coming down the slide at the very end, just a beautiful joy. It's a wonderful moment. That's again brilliant.
It is, and so important to the story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're nearly at time, maybe even gone over, but a couple last questions for you. Best campaign ever, not that you've worked on, but one that you just absolutely adore.
The Levi's.
Okay.
So the Levi's laundrette kicked it off, and then there are a number of ads that followed in that place. That, for a number of reasons, that's easily my favorite campaign. One, like we were teenagers when that came out, and I just remember the impact it had on kind of culture at the time. And they did those amazing things. They just used music tracks in a way that I didn't remember before. It is that got me interested in advertising. But what's wonderful is you go back and read the IPA case on it. Like Levi's were in so much trouble. That basically people were in combats. Levi's themselves were like your dad was wearing them. So, like, you know, if you're a teenager, you can't be wearing the same jeans as your dad. And they were just in real trouble. And this was kind of a last effort with BBH. This was their first client. Like, so they became an agency, you know, Hegarty on this. And their campaign was so successful. Like, it's 500% increase. Like, and it's great. But even at the time, do you remember Nick Kamen, who died recently? he strips down in the laundrette. And like Doug Cameron was saying, if that had been the other way around, if it had been a woman stripping down, it would never have worked. It was the fact that it was a guy stripping down. So there was a whole range of signaling that was going on there. The fact that it was done in the 50s America, not in modern day America, which was kind of Reagan Bush, which no one in the UK would have been fond of anyway, but it was set in that thing. So there's all these really interesting pieces that came together. But even originally he wasn't wearing boxer shorts, he was wearing like underpants, like briefs. But when they tried to get it through the kind of the equivalent of a clear cast, they were told they couldn't do that. So they said, okay, we'll wear like boxer shorts. And then sales of the boxer shorts went through the roof. Yeah. But then they just followed up time and time again. And they basically resurrected it so much that they were able to increase their price and come out of discount stores and set up their own stores later. It's an incredible case study on the impact of just amazing advertising,
Right. Last one for you. Kind of what would your top 3 tips be, I guess, for somebody, either somebody in marketing now or somebody even thinking about going into marketing? What are the kind of 3 things you're like, these are things that you should really think about or do, or just things you wish you'd known way back when starting out?
I'd say we covered them. I would say first and foremost, study the past. Like people, even reading an IPA case study once a week, it would take you about 90 minutes, an hour, 90 minutes to do it. And you just learn so much. You'll see the thinking, you'll see how it works through, you'll understand that, you'll see good practice at play. I think that's really, really important because we keep reinventing or making up words and phrases that we think are new ways of doing marketing. It's all been there before. I think that would be the first one. I would say the one we spent a bit of time talking earlier on, which is this idea of like strong views weakly held.
Yeah.
So the idea that you can build a belief, but don't get tied to your ideology. Don't believe that direct response advertising or direct marketing is the only way to do good advertising. Don't believe that TV is dead or TV is the only thing. Keep them as weakly held beliefs. I would say, I think they're probably the two most important things. The other one that we talked at the very beginning about, which is this idea that, like when you focus on the work, so you won't make great work unless you work really hard, and you need to high standards, and you really do. And accepting lower standards is you just get to mediocrity. So I think this idea that Russell had given me a number of years ago, which is like be hard on the work. We have an ambition to be Ireland's most effective marketers in the lottery, and it's a big ambition, one that we feel we can do, and so we benchmark our work against the best in the world.
Yeah. So
like our most recent advertising beat every Super Bowl score last year.
Right. In System 1.
Yeah. So in fact, we're the only brand at the moment that has 2 5-star ads in market.
Right.
At the same time. So like we like our ambition is at that level. We are competing, and we see ourselves as being able to hold our own against anyone in the world. And that's the ambition. But we strongly believe that there is a need to be nice to each other.
Yeah.
And to understand it's difficult, and to understand that just because a script is terrible doesn't mean that the person who wrote it is not good. They're a very good writer, and I think that's really important. And I think if people can learn the behaviors to do that, you get to good work.
Yeah. And again, tied to probably studying the past, like if you see what's working, what's done well in the past and why, those case studies that you talk about, or reading some of the books that you've mentioned, I think it does help you understand how to get to good work as well. So
yeah, like you have, like you go back to Tim Amber's quote, which is, when you spend enough time studying it and in it, you learn what not to do. So we take that very simple example of not branding till the very end. Like that's just a high risk strategy for me. And it's very hard for me to come to terms with a campaign where I would do that.
Yeah.
Now, we've built assets, so we know enough about that to build assets, so we don't have to do that, And actually, we did make an ad, the golf ad, pre-water slides, where I was worried that because we didn't get it right at the beginning, we were going to be in a situation where we might have a problem with branding. We kind of resolved that tactically, which I'd rather not do. But so if you know the stuff and you're continuously learning, then you build that benchmark of good and bad bets, and then you raise the bar. Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, we will leave it there. Paul Dervan, best-selling author of Run with Foxes,
best-selling
marketing leader, CMO of the National Lottery. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Conor.
I hope you enjoyed that episode. As I said at the outset, I've known Paul a long time. There probably isn't a week that goes by that Paul and myself don't talk about marketing. Yet, when I listen to him, I still learn. Paul reminds me of the importance of testing, being deliberate, consistent, and rigorous in how you apply things, but still take bets, and most importantly, to be courageous in your work. If you haven't had a chance to read his book, Run with Foxes, I would definitely encourage you to get a copy. So that's it for this episode. Thanks for listening to That's What I Call Marketing. If you did enjoy it, please do share and add comments with your feedback. From me, Conor Byrne, until the next episode, take care.